Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to another movie review. Today, we're going to be talking about the just released Godzilla vs. Kong. It's directed by Adam Wingard, written by Eric Pearson and Max Borenstein. It stars Alexander Skarsgård, Millie Bobby Brown, Rebecca Hall, Brian Tyree Henry, Shun Yuguri, Julian Dennison, Lance Reddick, Kyle Chandler, Demian Bashir, and others. The logline plot synopsis is: the epic next chapter in the cinematic monsterverse pits two of the greatest icons in motion picture history against one another, the fearsome Godzilla and the mighty Kong, with humanity caught in the balance. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of do two different reviews. First review I'm going to do is what it was like to watch this movie with what I think is the target audience for the movie, and it kind of will set your expectations for the kind of movie it is. I watched it with my almost 4-year-old son, who is a giant Godzilla fan. He's a kaiju fan. He just loves that stuff. He kind of got a passion for it, a taste for it with the original Jurassic Park. He was getting into dinosaurs, so, logically, I show him Jurassic Park. He loves it. We watched Jurassic Park a million times. Somewhere in there, though, we start watching old Godzilla movies. I think we got HBO Max. We got HBO Max last year, and they had just a ton of the stuff from the Criterion, because they have like their little subsection for the Turner Classic Movies section of HBO Max, and they had a bunch of the old Godzilla movies. So we just kind of started watching them. Over the past year, we've probably watched close to all of them, including the ones that weren't on there, including like just the Japanese productions, like the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, all the way to Shin Godzilla, and then obviously the legendary Monsterverse. Like, he's a big Kong fan too. He loves the original like 1933 King Kong movie. It's one of his favorite movies. I've probably watched it about 10 times last year, a couple times this year too. I mean, we just to show you, these never go back on the shelf. These never go back on the Blu-ray shelf. They are always easy to get for him. So he can just kind of grab them and he says, "Dad, let's watch King Kong Escapes. I want to see Mecha G. Mecha G." So I ended up being kind of very familiar with him. I didn't grow up a kaiju fan. I didn't grow up a Godzilla fan or even that much of a Kong fan. Like, I always, had appreciation, respect for the original Kong. Back when I was in my late teens, the Peter Jackson King Kong comes out, and I liked it. I liked it a lot back in the day. I cooled on it in the subsequent years, but I think actually there's a review of it on the channel somewhere. But yeah, but he kind of reinvigorated my appreciation for the series and watching the movies and kind of watching how they progressed from this very dark, very serious science fiction, almost horror movie, all the way up until like its more sillier incarnations. Things like King Kong Escapes or King Kong versus Godzilla or King Kong or Godzilla versus Mecha Godzilla, and then all the stuff in the 80s and 90s. They're fun movies. They're not, I wouldn't even say most of them are particularly like good in a traditional sense. But see, that's kind of one of my points here. Is like they're not good in a traditional sense a lot of the time. There are some that'll surprise you. Some of the filmmaking and the older ones, not just talking to special effects, but just the storytelling is very effective. It's engaging. There's a lot of cool kind of cultural stuff in there that is interesting to see as an American. But I do think we grade these movies on a little bit of a scale. I don't think we look at something like a Godzilla movie and expect it to be, Casablanca or fucking, There Will Be Blood or whatever. I don't know. I'm just throwing some titles out there. We just don't. At least I don't. I don't think that's fair. I don't look at all movies with like the same criteria. You look at like, what were the goals of the movie and did it accomplish those goals? That's generally how I look at movies. Especially because I watch such a wide variety of films. Like, I'm not like a specifically into genre stuff or specifically into comedies. I'm all over the map. I just appreciate filmmaking. I just love cinema. And so coming into Godzilla vs. Kong, like, my kid was super fucking stoked. We just showed him the one trailer that came out like a couple months ago, maybe a month and a half ago, and he was just super into it. And he was so into it that he even spotted like the actual villain of the movie. He's seen for like a split second in the trailer, and my kid spotted it and he started freaking out. I don't want to get into spoilers, so I'm not going to say exactly what it was. We're going to speak kind of generally in this review. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything specific. But watching it with him was awesome. It was awesome. I got to watch it through the lens of like a child enjoying something like this, which is kind of special. It's unique. And it's something to be like appreciated. Because like I said, I think this is more or less the target of this. You know, I know there's a bunch of man children out there, and even maybe Adam Wingard himself, which we'll talk about how I feel about Adam Wingard in the second review of this. You know, maybe it's just their arrested adolescent kind of perspective on the world and storytelling and all that kind of stuff. Sure, that's valid, and there's a lot of valid criticisms for this movie. But just watching a kid like really fucking love it. I mean, he was just glued to the screen. He was just captivated, and he was jumping all over the living room. And he's even got we got him Godzilla toys, and he's just having the time of his life. Like, he was so wound up. He tuckered himself so much. As soon as those credits hit, as soon as the screen went to black, he was fucking done. He was out. He fell asleep on my arms. Actually, if you want to see some pictures, you can go head over to my Twitter page, which is in the information. I posted some pictures of him because it was just so much fun to watch him enjoy it. And, you know, kids, they're not discerning. That's not what's happening when a kid's watching a movie. They're not looking for quality. They're not looking for, you know, whether or not like the characters are good or the script is good. Like it just delivers on the premise, Godzilla versus Kong. And those things work really well, especially for a kid. So if this is a movie you want to show like your young son or your young daughter, your young kids at all, and they have any inclination to like this kind of stuff, I think they'll probably enjoy themselves a lot, you know? It's just like it's like a big dumb Saturday morning cartoon. That's what it felt like more than anything, especially because recently I've kind of gone back and I was watching some of those old like 80s and early 90s cartoons that were like based on rated R properties. On the channel, I watched the entire 12 episode run of RoboCop, the animated series. And so I was kind of already acclimated to that style of storytelling and the kind of things that were in there, the kind of pace of those. And I think this largely kind of delivers on that kind of an experience. You know, it's not something to be measured against like the original. It's not at all. And I would say, you know, even just from my son, vicariously, I'm kind of giving his review of the movie. I think this is probably the one that he was the most extroverted, like excited about the movie. Like he was just totally into it from frame one. He was just having a great time. And it was really cool to see that. Now if we put on Papa's pants here, give you the more sober review, pun intended. It's okay. I'm going to see this like 50 more times in the next year probably because of my kid. But it was okay. Like, it is what it is. And I put it in that kind of perspective. I would, you know, how it measures up against the other movies. We'll just say the legendary movies. It's probably the third best one of the legendary films. That's Godzilla 2014. That's Kong, Skull Island. King of the Monsters, and now this. It's probably the third best one, you know. And it has like this breakneck pace. Like the movie never settles. The movie never gives you time to breathe. It's all just exposition dumping. The characters are probably the most shallow they've ever been. And this is something that the legendary series specifically, has always been kind of course correct. As the movies would come out, as reviews would come in, they would kind of change tact. Like the first Godzilla, 2014, they're like, not enough fucking Godzilla. Well, okay, King of the Monsters comes out, tons of Godzilla, but it's too dark, and like we don't like the eco-terrorist plot, and we don't like these characters, and there's not enough there. So by the time you get to Godzilla versus Kong, like it is just monster shit. I mean, the human characters, they could be anybody. It didn't have to be that way either, because there is established characters from, you know, King of the Monsters or whatever. They're in this movie, and they're given nothing to do. They're just kind of there to just move the plot along, basically. They're there to give context and structure to what you're watching, all of the action scenes. And it's like, well, fair enough, I suppose. If that it was the intention of the movie, which it kind of seems like it was. Like, there is not even a tipping of the hat or something that you could see that was on the cutting room floor, or that they were trying to do some bigger emotional thing with the characters. Like, that's not even there at all. So it's very clear that that was never their intention. They just never cared about that. This is just about pure spectacle. It's the event movie. Out of the series, you could say all of them are event movies, whatever. But this one is the one that's just like, it is the showdown. It is the fight. And that's what the whole movie's about. And it doesn't like even attempt at doing anything deeper, trying to say anything interesting. And I think, a lot of people, like a lot of adults, they're definitely going to push back on that. They're not going to like that. Like myself included, like as a, being more critical about it. I mean, there's stuff even in the action scenes that I find left me wanting. The movie has a constant problem with like establishing scale. I don't know why. I just could never get a good sense of like how big they were, or like how big they were in context to the places they were fighting. Like, it just never really read correctly. Especially there's a big, it's in the trailers, there's a big Hong Kong fight and it's all the neon lights and stuff like that. Like, they never give you a sense of like, it just never feels tangibly huge. And part of that is just because, like, well, it's a fucking cartoon. You're watching a completely CGI creation. There is nothing. There's no human characters. They do these, like, they're trying to do that. Like, this is why I would say this is a fair criticism in terms of, like, a failure as a filmmaker. They try to, because they try to show you a few shots of, like, people on the ground level looking up and destruction's happening. But it's so brief. It's so fucking brief that the fights have, like, kind of not... The stakes are very low for the fights with the monsters. Like, you just never have a sense of tension or like danger, because I think, like, one of the important components of the more successful Godzilla movies is actually the human tragedy of it. Even in the sillier ones, like, you need to acknowledge what is going on, and it helps. It not just helps give dramatic tension, but it also just gives you scale. Like, you need to see how big they are in juxtaposition to people more than this movie kind of allows for. I don't know why. I just, like, it was something that really stuck out like a sore thumb when I was watching the movie. And I think a lot of that had to do with, because it just turns into a cartoon. And there's so many times it just turns into a giant cartoon. Not to say, like, completely, it's not that they're not entertaining. And I think generally that, like, they escalate in interesting ways. I think they're paced pretty well. But those are, like, in a vacuum, those things are paced very well. Because the movie itself is actually... It feels so slight. It goes by so fast. I mean, I guess credit where credit's due. It goes by fast. It's a quick 2 hours. Like, because it's just throwing stuff constantly. The movie is constantly changing. We're on to doing the next thing. And there's never any time to kind of settle in and just appreciate anything. Or have the world feel like it's more fleshed out. I guess there's an argument for that, saying, like, well, we've already established all this stuff. We don't have to do that. Like I said, this is the main event. This is what all this stuff has been kind of building towards for the past 7 years. That's fair. But it also just comes off as a little lazy, in my opinion. And this is an Adam Wingard thing. Like, Adam Wingard is a guy that, like, I would really like to like his movies more than I do. I like You're Next. I like The Guest. But they're such simple premises, and it's really more about, like, the concept, even with those, to a certain degree. Like, the characters really are not that interesting, and they're not very realistic. Then you get to something like Death Note, which I thought was just kind of a complete clusterfuck. It was just a complete mess. Again, he has the same problems. Like, he makes movies with, like, interesting, kind of on the surface concepts, visually interesting, and then he just kind of just doesn't know how to put the pieces together of a narrative. He doesn't know how to create a flow. And I think this movie suffers from that, to be fair. But at the same time, if I take it on the Godzilla scale, on the monster movie scale, I think it's okay. Like, I think it's okay. I think you'll be like, oh, okay, I watched that. You're not going to be offended by what you're seeing. It's definitely the most exciting in terms of like the delivering on the fights and stuff out of the series, because a lot of times, and this was a big criticism, is something the series is very reflexive, is that like everything is at nights and it's raining and it's foggy and you can't really see what the fuck is going on. And especially you go watch like King of the Monsters, that shit is just like there's just clouds and fire and like all this stuff that like just completely obscures everything that you're seeing a lot of the times. The action itself is not very explicit in terms of like your visual acuity, what you're able to see. And a lot of that's probably because, they're giant CG creatures. They're trying to add some sort of depth to them. They're trying to add, probably actually part of that's to do with scale, constantly showing you how big they are by juxtaposing them to other elements, like elemental things, whether it's clouds or rain or volcanoes or whatever, So to be fair, I think there was a method to the madness. It wasn't all about just hiding the monsters just to hide them because of CGI reasons. But this one, most of the fights, everything's very well lit. A lot of the stuff takes place during the day, in the light of the sun, and you really do. You really see it. You see it all, and I think a lot of it's fun. They're well put together sequences. Like I said, the human stuff is completely forgettable. I didn't really care. It didn't kind of bother me, to be honest. The only thing that bothered me, I was like, oh, why do you have so many characters? Like, you don't need this many characters to achieve the same thing. It felt like sometimes they were just shoehorning stuff in, especially when they bring back characters from King of the Monsters. They really feel shoehorned in there. Like, they don't need to be there to tell this story at all. And they kind of they have to spend time with them because they're characters that you recognize. I think it would have been much better if they had kind of just like orientated the story to just like create a little bit of drama, create like a love triangle, do something just to add some personal stakes. It doesn't have to be Shakespeare. It doesn't, but it should be something. Like, it almost felt like there was some weird, like, this is like this weird, like, modern fucking filmmaking, postmodern woke shit about like, oh no, we can't have characters just because they're a man and a woman in a movie doesn't mean there can be sexual tension. They respect each other as peers or whatever. Like, just like, it was Rebecca Hall and Alexander Skarsgård. Like, there should have been like some sort of romantic link or something just to give the movie something, just to give it a layer, just so when they're in danger there is like this heightened sense of it, right? Doesn't want to do that. Doesn't even attempt to do that. Although I guess like the introduction when Skarsgård meets Rebecca Hall at the beginning of the movie, there is like a moment where he's so happy that she agrees to like help him do whatever they're gonna do, and he kisses her on the cheek, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then he shakes her hand. It was like this really weird, dumb moment. That was like, you would think like, oh, is that gonna develop into something? Are we gonna do something with that? No, it never does. At least not that I could tell. I don't know. It's one of those, maybe I'll watch it. When I watch it another 50 times this year, maybe I'll find some nuances. Maybe I'll be able to get in there. But just a few things that I did actually like about it, though, because I know I've just kind of been bitching about it. I really liked Brian Tyree Henry. He plays Bernie. He basically plays like almost like a black Alex Jones. He has like he's like the conspiracy theorist guy. And he has conspiracy theories about Monarch and what's been going on in these laboratories. And he's even gotten a job as like a low-level janitor to like break in to see what's going on. Or maybe it wasn't at Monarch. It was at Apex. There's like, because it's Godzilla versus Kong, and there's like two competing factions basically, even though they don't ever feel like they're really competing. That stuff is never built out in any way that makes any fucking sense whatsoever. Honestly, I'm not even sure really what the point of what these dudes were trying to accomplish was. Because it goes by so fast. Everything just goes bam, 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 bam. Everything is an exposition dump, like, and then you're off to the next set piece, and you kind of just kind of all washes over you. Like, the main points of like what these competing entities are really trying to accomplish really gets lost in there, and you don't really know necessarily what the fuck is going on. Yeah, but I just enjoyed him. I actually kind of like him. He was in the remake of Child's Play, and he was a bright spot in that movie, I would say. And it's too bad too, because I liked the way that some of the performances were like modulated. Like the approach to some of the performances felt very like 1970s Godzilla movie, especially Demian Bashir, who plays like he's like the head bad guy over at Apex, and he's really silly in a fun way though. Like I really liked what he was doing with this character. I even made me kind of laugh out loud a few times just because of how kind of hammy and broad and over the top he was. But I thought it served this kind of movie very well. And I wish sometimes that maybe they leaned a little bit more into that kind of stuff, because it kind of acknowledges that it's very goofy, that it's a really kind of dumb movie. It's not really trying to obscure that. It's not trying to be overly serious or self-serious, you know? And like I said, it's kind of like very reflexive to at least the two Godzilla movies that came before it. You know, because you have Godzilla 2014, which is this very serious, very grim, kind of trying to capture the spirit more of maybe the original 1954 Godzilla movie. And then King of the Monsters is kind of like more of, feels like, you know, like actually like the 80s era, the 80s or even 90s era, where there's a lot of stuff going on with the human beings and a lot of silliness and a lot of like bad melodrama and stuff. So by the time you get here, they're just like, nah, we're not even going to go there at all. You know, I'm curious how this would do even critically if it didn't come out under the circumstances it did. You know, for a lot of people, a lot of film Twitter and stuff, this is their first time back in a cinema in like a year. Because now people are starting to actually go back. You know, me, good guy Shaun over here, I've been trying to save cinema since August, you know? Going to see Tenet Unhinged. Going to see a bunch of flashback movies for $5. It was a great time. It's been good for me. I don't fucking like being in a full theater, so it's been good for me. But theaters, not so much. So I think that may skew a lot of perspectives because they're just going to be excited to go back. Another movie that came out recently, it came out last week or last weekend, was Nobody, that Bob Odenkirk, John Wick looking thing. And I think a lot of people also gave that movie a pass as well. I haven't seen it myself, but I've read the criticisms, and like it seems very similar to Godzilla vs. Kong, where it's like, oh my god, isn't it just great to be back in a theater? And this one is probably going to bring people back, and it honestly probably plays really well on the big screen. We were gonna take our kid, my wife and I. We were gonna take our son, but he's just like a little too young to really. I don't want to ruin it for other people that have paid to go see the movie, so I don't want my kid like running up and down the aisles. Like we took him to see, was it Coco, like months ago, and there was only like 3 other people in the theater, but I just feel bad. Like you pay your money, you know, I don't want my kid ruining it for you, and I wouldn't want that for this. And I think almost like for him, it was just better to be at home where he could have his toys and jump on his little trampoline and go nuts, you know. So it was kind of a cool way to do that. I may hit up a matinee with him though, just to watch it with him, just to let him watch it. Like I don't even give a shit about myself. Like I said, like it was fine. It's whatever. Like I think it delivers on the premise in a very broad sense, but it's got a lot of problems. It's got a lot of the problem hallmarks that Wingard as a director has. But I think a lot of people are giving it a pass, and that's fine. I don't really have a problem necessarily with people giving it a pass. You grade these things on a scale. Like you can't expect. I don't know what some people are expecting. Some people are just like going fucking ham about just like this is the end of like culture, and oh my god, fucking ridiculous. But yeah, I would like to see it on the big screen with him. So if we can catch like a midweek matinee, I'll take him to see this on IMAX. Blow his mind. That would be super fun. I actually would really look forward to doing that. So if I get a chance, I probably will. It'll probably be in the theater for the next 3 months because there's just not a lot of movies out. So I'm sure they'll make room for Godzilla vs. Kong. I can't imagine that it's like not going to make some money. And that's a lot of people are also saying this is going to be the first like kind of bigger box office stateside anyways. Probably since the pandemic started, you know? So we'll see. We'll see. I thought it was fine. I liked it well enough. I'm going to watch it another million times, like I said. So maybe I'll have more thorough thoughts. You know, maybe we'll get a spoiler cast if I can get enough of the other Zoobox guys wrangled together that watched it. We can do a spoiler cast about it or something. Because I'd be curious to see what like people that don't either have kids or are not familiar with any of these movies at all. I'd be really curious to like what they would think about it. I think like even my brother Dan, I don't even think he's watched the other movies in this series. It would be fun to make him watch this and to see if he gets anything out of it. I think my brother Dan would hate this fucking movie. Just because it's just so stupid. But I think that, but you know, it is what it is. It is what it is. Anyways, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. Also, I'd be curious. What did you think about Godzilla vs. Kong? Leave it in the comments. Let me know. Let me know under what circumstances you watched it. If you went to the theater. If you think that changed your opinion on the movie. If you watched it at home. What did you think of it? Be curious. All right, everybody. You have the best day ever.